much narrower lobe of sensitivity.
What's happening, Booth Junkies? Mike Delgaudio here, back with another video on home studio recording and voiceover. And I've gotten some messages in the comments and some email asking if I could talk about the Shure SM7B microphone. And there's a lot of videos out there about the SM7B, but I thought I'd give you my take on it and some of the considerations on why you may or may not want to use an SM7B. Let's start with what is a Shure SM7B? It's this microphone right here. This microphone is a dynamic microphone first, as opposed to a condenser microphone, which is right here. This microphone, the Shure SM7B, costs about $399 retail on Amazon. We're going to compare it to a condenser microphone, and this is the CAD E100S that you've seen me use in other videos. Also, $399 on Amazon. So they're about the same price. We're going to talk about the differences between them and some of the features and things that they offer and why you might choose one over the other. First, let's start with this SM7B, since that's why we're here. The SM7B is a dynamic microphone, which means it does not require, under normal circumstances, it does not require phantom power. And you notice I said under normal circumstances, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But normally, this is just a microphone that you plug into an XLR jack and it will record. Most dynamic microphones require, and the SM7B is no different, they require a lot of gain. And whenever you see somebody talk about the SM7B, you'll see that they say it requires a lot of gain. What that means is, on your preamplifier, and I'm just going to record and check both of these using my Zoom H5 so that we can get the same preamp, but that means the knob on your preamp needs to be up higher than you might expect. Typically, when you're recording with an SM7B, if you want to have a nice, clean, crisp sound, you either have to have, one, a good, muscular, powerful preamp, and that usually is something that you'd find in a radio studio. And you won't find it on the portable devices or the prosumer devices that you have at home. Those will have not enough gain, not enough oomph to take that signal in, which means you have to turn that preamp all the way up in order to get a good sound. When you turn your preamp all the way up in order to get a good sound, you also turn up the underlying hiss that's present in all preamps everywhere, no matter what. So it's certainly possible that after you buy your SM7B and you plug it into your Focusrite or your PreSonus preamp, that you find you have to turn that gain all the way up, and all of a sudden you hear that shh, that underlying hiss that's just inherent with every preamp when you turn it all the way up to 10. As opposed to a condenser mic. Now, a condenser mic requires always the phantom power, 48 volts of phantom power. And because they're powered, they generally don't require as much gain because there's more electricity in it. In its essence, a microphone, all it is the conversion of the movement of the capsule. It converts that movement into electrical energy that gets taken down the line and converted into the waveform, the actual signal that you record. Dynamic mics, because the only electricity that's in there is the electricity that's generated by your voice moving that capsule, it's very, very tiny. So you have to have very sensitive equipment to listen for it. And preamps are pretty sensitive. But there's certain electronics that you can add to make it so that it's louder before it gets to the preamp, or you can take that away and get a cleaner sound, but it's a quieter sound, and so you have to have a more sensitive preamp. SM7B requires that. The E100, because it's a condenser mic, you can generally, to get the same volume voice from me talking, you can have less gain in your preamp, which means a lower inherent noise floor that's in your track. There's lower noise that's just inherent in your signal that's always there. So right now I've got this microphone's preamp set at about 4. This microphone's preamp is set at about 8. Now I'll get right up on them and we'll see what the difference is. First we'll talk into the SM7B. I'm talking directly into this, and you notice it has a built-in pop filter. So it also comes with a large pop filter that you can use for remote broadcasts. If you're outside, this will really catch the wind, but it's also good for catching the wind from your voice. It comes with a thinner one, but you can get right up on this microphone, and generally you won't have pops or plosives that make it into the mic. If we switch over to the condenser mic and we get right up on that, you'll see right away we get plosives. Those plosives are always there. There's nothing you can do about it unless you put a pop filter in front of it. So the condenser mics are almost always going to require some sort of wind deflection so that you can get that wind out of the microphone. You can learn it through mic technique. You can angle the mic. You can add a pop filter. There's lots of different techniques that you can use to try and get that plosive sound out of it. But the condenser mics do require it. These microphones also have different patterns, and that's the patterns of sensitivity that are around the microphone. The SM7B is a cardioid microphone, which means there's a lobe of sensitivity around that microphone, and it's generally off to the side and off to about an angle of about here. And the dynamic microphones tend to have a fall off in sensitivity very quickly. So as I listen to the SM7B and as I step away from the microphone, we should see that the sound falls off very quickly. And so the distance from here to here, that sound level, is quiet. Compared to the E100, the condenser mic, this is a super cardioid microphone, which means its lobe of sensitivity is a bit narrower. Both have their advantages. So the super cardioid means it's less sensitive from the sides, from the back, and there's a narrower lobe, which means it will reject some of the sounds that are coming from the side. So if you have street noise or people talking, the super cardioid pattern will help. But its range of sensitivity is very sensitive in the front. So even as I move farther away, we hopefully should find that it's about the same. It won't be exactly the same because there's a rule of proximity. But we should find that at the same distance, the E100 is louder than the SM7B, all other things being equal. Now, those differences can be leveraged in much the same way. So one of the reasons people like dynamic microphones is because you can be right up on them, you don't get the plosives, but it also means that you don't hear the surrounding noise very much. The super cardioid pattern, and that's because it's got that sensitivity fall off very quickly. So you have to be really right up on that microphone to get the sensitivity out of it. Whereas the supercardioid, it's physics. It's the sound rejection from the sides so that you can be right in that sweet spot of the microphone itself so that you can reject some of that noise around it. Two different approaches to the same problem. There are other advantages to it, but for voiceover and for the home recording studio, that's the primary advantage I see, is one, the dynamic allows you to get up close and reject sound from far away because it's less sensitive. And for this microphone, it's the super cardioid pattern is one of the reasons I really like this microphone, and I use it quite a bit. Now, all of that is to say that there's also a shotgun microphone here. So you normally see me in the booth with the shotgun microphone. And the shotgun microphone, I particularly like the Sennheiser microphone because I love the way I sound in it. But the shotgun microphone is also really good for noise rejection. That's got a much narrower lobe of sensitivity. So it will reject from the back, the sides, much more than even a super cardioid pattern. But I choose this microphone not for its pattern, but for the way I sound on it. I love the way I sound on that microphone. I love the way I sound on this microphone. Now, because I'm using this consumer-grade preamp in my recording device, in this H5, I have to have the preamps all the way up or up really high for the SM7B. And you'll hear it as I isolate that channel. There is an underlying hiss that's much more than the E100 because the E100, the preamp is a lot lower. And for most cases, if you're recording audiobooks, if you're recording advertisements, that underlying hiss with just the microphone and the consumer or prosumer grade preamps, it won't be acceptable. Your noise floor will simply be too high. You'll get rejected because there's too much hiss, and really a gate won't help because it's present everywhere in the signal. So what people usually end up doing when they have a 7B is they buy one of these. This is called a cloud lifter. Now, if you recall way back in the beginning of the video, I said that under normal circumstances, this microphone does not require phantom power. However, this device, its sole purpose is to increase the amount of gain you get out of a dynamic mic before it gets into your preamp. So this device lives in between the microphone and the preamp, and it has one job. That one job is to increase the amount of gain significantly for dynamic microphones. This means that in order to get this microphone to get a quality signal like this one, you have to add this. This costs $150. So now this microphone setup is really the sum of these two parts, $399, $400, plus $150. Now it's a much more expensive, $400, $550, much more expensive than this one. That's the big knock on the dynamic microphone, in particular, the 7B. There's another dynamic microphone that's very popular out there called the RE20. I don't have an experience with that one. Somebody wants to send me one to try it, I'll hook it up to my cloud lifter and we'll see how it sounds compared to this one. I don't have one, but I have heard the same thing, that they do both require a fair bit of gain. And that's why you see them in radio stations, because that professional equipment has that gain. But you'll need a cloud lifter. So what I'll do is I'll add the cloud lifter to our signal chain in between this microphone and the preamp, and turn on phantom power, and we'll see how much different it sounds. So we do this by first disconnecting the microphone from the preamp. We add the cloud lifter to it. The cloud lifter itself, it's pretty cool. Doesn't require any electricity on its own. Doesn't have a separate plug or a USB cable or anything like that. It just gets its phantom power from your preamp, and it's just essentially a booster for that signal. So we just add an XLR cable from one end, from the microphone to the cloud lifter, and then a second XLR cable from the cloud lifter to the preamp. So now we're going to plug that in. And right off the bat, we can hear that it got much louder. Oh, let's turn that down. Right off the bat. I had headphones plugged in, so it was feeding back because it suddenly got so much louder that the headphones were feeding back into the microphone. But now we'll see that this microphone is now clipping like crazy. So I have to dial the gain way back. But interestingly now, I've dialed that gain to the same point as it's set for the E100. They're both now set on this preamp at 4, whatever that equates to. So now we've got both of these microphones. The preamps are at the same level of quietness. So presuming that the cloud lifter doesn't actually add any noise or hiss itself to your signal, we now have the preamps equalized. So they're both going to be the same. I'll put on my headphones and see how it sounds. Okay, so the other things to consider when you're talking about these two different mics is now you've considered that this microphone costs $150 more than this one because this one requires the cloud lifter. When you get up into the $600 range for mics, a new world opens up to you, especially if you're looking at condenser mics. There's the Neumann TLM 102, I think, is in the $600 range, $650, I think. The TLM 103 is about $999, but you do start to get into a new class of microphone when you start talking about $550, $600 and more for microphones, especially for condenser mics. You're not in the world of the Rode NT1A or the Blue Yeti anymore. You're up in the level of the professional microphones. And then you'd have to really put this $550 setup against another $550 microphone, because you're not really competing with the $350, $400 microphone anymore. You've really moved up a step. So the question is the Sm7b worth it? And it's It's hard to say. I can't say yes, absolutely, it's worth it. It depends on what you're going to try and do. If your studio is less than ideal, if you're outside a booth, you might have some street noise, then the dynamic might be for you. If you're going to record a podcast and there's going to be multiple people in the room, the SM7B might be for you because you'll be able to reject your neighbor's voice because they'll be too far away for your microphone to pick it up. That would be more problematic, likely, with a condenser microphone, especially if you had a cardioid condenser microphone, which might be with your partner, your cohort, might be within the lobe of sensitivity. And then you'd have two people's voice getting into that one microphone. Things would cancel out. It would get weird. That's why you see these a lot in the podcast where two people are talking. The built-in pop filter is handy. This one does require the external pop filter. They're different for different situations. So, what should you buy? The one that sounds best for your voice. That's really the advice that will always happen with microphones. Buy the one that you can afford. That's the best one for your voice. But now you can see some of the difference between what you'll get with the two different microphones. And I'm trying to switch back and forth as much as I can so that you can actually get a sense of the sound of how each one of these sounds. So I hope this helps. Now, go pick a microphone and record something amazing.